Good morning, everyone. I have 9:30 on my computer clock. I see everybody here. Mayor Herron, your daughter had access to your computer again, I see. I'm just looking for attendance here. I see Councillor Bermansky, I see Councillor Hughes, I see Mayor Herron. We're joined by Councillor Killick and administration. I see Anshman. It's always great seeing you, sir. Welcome. So I'm going to call our January 17th Community Living Standing Committee meeting to order. I put in the chat, I may have some technical difficulties this morning. So Councillor Hughes, you may have to step in. They're working on the street in front of my house. Not sure what they're doing, but I'm going to start off with an informal land acknowledgement that we respectfully acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. So I have number 3, adoption of the agenda. Does anybody had a chance to look over our agenda? Any changes, any additions, deletions, concerns? Seeing none, then I'm going to declare that our agenda be adopted as presented to us. As I've already mentioned, we have Anshuman Kaur, who is our 2021 EAC chair here, and he's going to be presenting our annual report a little later on, if you don't mind, Anshuman, because we have some other committee business as well. So not too far down. And so I'm looking for number 5, which is our approval of minutes. And I've got our Community Living Standing Committee minutes of December 13th. I hope everybody's had a chance to review them. Any concerns with any of the minutes? Councillor Bermansky, Councillor Hughes, Mayor Herron? I don't see any of that. So I'm going to declare the minutes of our December 13th 2021 minutes adopted as presented in today's agenda package. And we're moving on to committee business 6.1, our advisory committee minutes and agenda items. We've got 2 items. We've got our November 25th, 2021 EAC unadopted minutes and our December 1st YAC adopted minutes. Is that adopted minutes or unadopted minutes? Can somebody clarify that in my meetings?
They should be unadopted minutes.
Yeah.
So actually, you know what? I do apologize, Councillor Mackay. I believe these minutes were adopted, but because of the procedure that we have to bring them forward, but they were adopted at the December meeting and they didn't come forward at that time, I believe.
All right, thanks for the clarification, Ms. Wong. I appreciate that. Can I get a, I don't know if there's no really, if there's no changes to them, they're just for information items. Any concerns with that? Any of the members of the committee? Seeing none, and I apologize again, I've got you kind of small on my screen, so please either wave frantically or just put something, raise your hand in the reactions button. That'd be great. I appreciate that. So I'm going to just declare 6.1 adopted and they can move forward to our next council meeting. 6.2, request for the standing committee motion from Environmental Advisory Committee presented by Megan Myers. I see Megan on screen here. Anything to present, Megan?
No, we have Anshuman Kaur here to present.
Okay, is he going to present on this initial motion as well in relation to the grant applications?
No, sorry, he's here for the annual report, but he is here if you have any questions on their recommendations.
All right, I appreciate that. I can leave it open to Anshuman if you want to go through that and provide any of the background, but we also have Councillor Bermansky and Councillor Killick here as well. So I believe they were both at that meeting, or one of them was. Any comments by either committee members or Mr. Kaur? Anshuman, go ahead if you want.
No, I don't have any additional comments to it. I mean, we reviewed the applications and that was about it. And we made some recommendations just to make sure that we were being fair. And we were also very conscious about the fact that we had not given out money for this grant. And we wanted some initiatives from the community to come forward. And that was the basic idea that we followed in allocating the grant this year.
Thank you very much for the background. Just one question from me. Was there more applications received than received money, or pretty much anybody who had put forward a project were funded in some form or all?
No, we did look at the merits of the applications. It was not always that just because you applied, you will get something. So there had to be a good justification for it. But, given that we had so few applications, in fact, I think Megan and Peyton had to actually go out and help people, encourage them to make an application, to strengthen their applications. And so we kind of took a very proactive approach. But in the end, the number of grant applications that we got was really very low, very few of them. So it's not that we didn't even have a chance to give out all the money we had, but we made we were able to give out a reasonable amount of money.
Okay, and that may spawn a question a little bit later in relation to how do we proactively get out into the community and see. And I also see that we actually have technically one with the River Lot 56 naturalization project, where technically it doesn't fall within policy, but I take the committee's recommendation on the merits of that. So any other comments from committee members? Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
Thanks. It's just a couple quick questions. Well, I'm not sure it's going to be to Ashman, but I'm thinking it might be to staff. The White Spruce Forest, they always apply, the Committee to Help the White Spruce Forest always applied for significant funds. And I'm trying to remember, are we treating them differently now? I remember there was discussion about that, or did they just not apply? Are they still getting money? Can you give us an update about what's going on with the White Spruce Forest?
They didn't apply this year. I think the last time they applied was in 2017. They're still working on projects. I mean, I'm not directly involved with them, but they just haven't applied to the Environmental Initiatives Grant Program. And I believe now, and it's not under my branch, but I believe Public Operations now has a line item to assist with Grey Nuns White Spruce Park projects.
Yeah, I thought there was something there. I just couldn't remember what. The other question is, I don't know if anybody asked this, but how do you do a pop-up garden? Because gardens take time, and to me, pop-up is like pop up and then you pop down. And so how do you pop up a garden?
Good question. It's basically, I don't know the actual materials that they use, but it was actually done in my community and some communities throughout Edmonton. But it's basically they use movable liners. It's not like your basic built structures. So it would be a liner and it would be put onto the turf, and they would put dirt in there and they'd be able to garden that way. It's just not a raised garden bed in a permanent structure. So at the end of the season, they could remove the soil from there and then remove that liner and store it for another year.
So is the intention to only have it for a year, or is the intention to continue? Like, I guess, why are we only doing this as a temporary basis versus a permanent basis in this location that they're bringing forward?
We're doing it as a pilot. So part of the grant program is that, you know, if something like this hasn't been done, we'll consider it as a pilot. So there's never been something like this done in our community. So Environment Branch, Public Operations, and Rec and Parks are involved in this. So there's a lot of moving pieces to it. So we're going to do this as a pilot, have some lessons learned, and then see how we can blanket this across the organization and promote it within our community. So that's why we're doing it as a pilot. It's never been done before. And I think that Rec and Parks are doing some work on this. So we want to feed into that work going forward in 2022 and 2023.
So just out of curiosity, like, how much land are we talking about here? Is it like it's not just like a 10 by 20 plot, I'm assuming. And where in Braeside is this intending to be set up, just so we can check it out what it is?
That's a good. Where in Braeside? I think it was off of Barrymore. It's a small piece of land. I think the consideration was between a natural area and a fence line, so it's not very small. I don't know the actual dimensions of it, but we could provide when an actual location is determined when we're working with public operations and rec and parks. We could provide that location to council.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. I think that was it. I'm still trying to figure out if this is a really small plot of land, like getting water there is an issue. Like that's the biggest thing with gardening is getting water. So I'm not sure how you can get the water there, but that's going to be your problem to solve. I just can't figure out why we're not just putting a garden there, period. Like I'm looking at Lacombe Park Garden Connection Space and they're putting in a garden. And I've seen other places just put in a garden. Like say, okay, this is a garden. I just don't understand why we have to do a pilot for a garden because we know how gardens work. So what makes this need to be a pilot program that's different than just saying we're allocating land for a garden?
Diane, do you want to talk from the Rec and Parks perspective about community gardens?
Thanks for the question, Megan, and to council. With community gardens, we do look to find areas where a garden may be feasible and that the community becomes engaged and involved. So with community gardens, it is very community focused and it comes from the grassroots. So with this particular garden, great question, Councillor Hughes, in terms of why is it pop up and not permanent? We could get our staff to provide an IR back to council on this particular garden and provide you with more information going forward. I think they're just trying to test out if this is the right location and if there's community support for this garden.
Okay, so the intention is that if it's successful and the community likes it, then we go permanent. So the product of this garden then, it's like, because a neighborhood has applied for this application, correct? So then they will take the products and then distribute it as they see fit. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. All right, I think I'm out of questions now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I think my point was just reading the project description. It was it's a group from the neighborhood, I'm assuming, that has applied to try this probably based on what they've heard about other pop-up gardens. And so they want to just kind of dip their toes into the water, perhaps. I was trying to find a smart analogy for a pop-up garden, but it was gone. It's Monday morning. It's not there. Anyways, any other questions from any other committee members? I don't see anything. Councillor Killick, any questions?
No, thank you very much, though, for Megan for bringing the grant requests forward.
All right, we have a recommended motion that can I get Councillor Bermansky? You're a member of that committee, correct? Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
Can you read in? I don't think you need to read in the project description, but it would, if you could put in the applicant and then the requested amount, and I think that should suffice.
Okay, so you just want like the Bless Society and the 2250 kind of thing?
Correct.
Okay.
The motion should be in the chat, or if it's on your package there. I don't know. Renee, do you have the motion?
I've got it, yeah.
Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
there's not a motion here, but the request for standing committee, so.
Yeah, that should suffice. Thank you.
Okay. A request for a standing committee motion from Environmental Advisory Committee and presented by Megan Myers and Acting Manager of Environment. The Bless Big Lake Environment Support Society for $2,250. The Braeside Pop-Up Neighborhood Garden, $5,000. Lacombe Park Garden, and I guess it's called Connection Place, $5,000. Friends of Leo Nickerson School Environmental Society, $5,000. River Lot 56 Naturalization Project, 2,600. It's very, very small here, sorry, $2,692. And the other one's not showing on my screen, sorry.
No,
Sorry,
that's fine.
I think the last number is 2662, and I believe you just said 2692.
Okay, that's better. Now I can read it. Thank you. Okay, 2662 for a total amount of 19,912.
Great, thank you. Any opening comments? Or any, were you, I can't remember, I can't recall in the minutes, were you at this one, Councillor Bermansky?
I was at the meeting, and again, a lot of the new gardens seem to see success in the previous gardens, so that's why it was agreed that the new ones should be, you know, I guess approved as well.
Okay. Any other, thank you. Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see how many community gardens are being initiated by our residents. It takes a bit of work to get these things going, but I really think it's really going to be a help to just drive the community together, which is something I think our community really needs right now after what we've been going through for the past 2 years. And also it just helps so much to us connect to the land and there's so many benefits. I'm just really happy to see that the grants that we're doing have this opportunity, because I think it will have long lasting impacts on our community in a positive way. So these are great grants that I'm seeing. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
I have your comment, sorry.
Well, you can comment in relation to the motion or something in relation to question, because you can close later, Councillor Bermansky.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Anything, Councillor Killick? No, that's okay. I just want to give you the opportunity.
Thank you for the opportunity, but no.
All right. No, my only, Mayor Herron, any comments? No, great. I can only add my endorsement as Councillor Hughes has added hers. I think these are fantastic. It is a little unfortunate, or even we'll have to maybe look at how we actually get out there and get more of a proactive way or methods of informing community, just to see, because I mean, as you noted before, not all of the funds were used that are available. And I mean, if these are projects that we can support, there must be similar ones that are out there. And so thank you very much, Anshuman and Megan. I appreciate that. And Councillor Romansky, you can close.
I just had a comment that in going through these, it was nice to see the community excited about doing things together. So I saw it as a garden party replacing a block party. So again, hope they're all successful and everyone enjoys.
Great comments. Thank you. Call the question then. All in favor of the recommendation? You can raise your hand, Councillor Urbanski. I can see it. Yeah, that's carried unanimously then. Thank you very much. Moving on to new business, 7.1. I knew we would get here fast, but Environmental Advisory Committee 2021 annual report. As we've already heard, we have Anshuman Kaur, who is I believe you're the outgoing chair. Is that correct?
Outgoing chair, yeah.
That's sad. Right. Thank you very much for all of your work on the committee and other committees and involvement with our community. It's very much appreciated. So Megan, are you going to do any introduction first, or are you just going to turn it over to the chair?
Yeah, I'll just turn it over to the chair. I think everybody's quite familiar with Anshuman. I am actually going to, I'll share my screen and he's going to speak to it. So yeah, when you're ready, just let me know.
Yeah, Megan, go ahead. Thanks.
I don't have a screen shared yet, do I?
Okay.
Hang on. Sorry, Megan, I don't have it shared yet.
Can everybody else see it? Okay.
Sorry, Megan, I still don't see it, but is there anybody else that has it or can share it?
I can see
It's
it.
coming through to
Oh,
me.
I apologize then. It could be my technical difficulties. I apologize. Go ahead then. Please forgive me.
No worries. I fully understand. We get into these kind of difficulties every day now. Thanks a lot for allowing me to present the advisory committee report for 2021. I served on this committee for 2 years, first year as a vice chair and the second year as a chair. It was one of the committees that I wanted to be on for a long time because this is what drives me when it comes to Athabasca University. This is one of the courses that relates to environment that has been one of my focus areas. So it was really good to have this first-hand experience and how it is managed at the city level. So we'll move on to the second slide and talk a little bit about the role of the committee. So the role of the committee is actually pretty much set. We provide advice to the council. And we obviously assume that there is a good alignment between council and administration, and what is coming to us has the nod from both sides to be considered by EAC. We provide input to administration, which are some informal comments on some of the bylaws and issues and programs that come our way. And we also receive information from administration. Normally, this is to help us understand the issues and to be able to provide inputs on it on a later date. One of the things that I would like to suggest, and that is what we have talked about earlier as well, I think the role could be expanded a little more because it is a citizen committee and citizens are selected because of certain backgrounds that they have or certain passions that they have. And it would be great if the EAC also would encourage some new ideas, some, apart from the routine that happens, to actually get citizens to share some new things that they would like to see the city do, which have not yet been identified. So that is one of the things that was something that would add a little more flexibility and get more citizens interested in participating in it. So next slide, Megan. Thanks. So our 2021 priorities were pretty much, we addressed most of these. We looked at the environmental grant program. It was good to actually have some applications. In 2020, we did not have any. So we were, and this is always an interesting part of what we do. So we get to see how the community is involved. And I think in the current situation with the COVID, there are certain things like well-being of the society and health issues. And I think green spaces have been really very helpful for our citizens during these tough times. We provided some advice on the green environmental strategy, the parks bylaws, and we also looked at the PACE and CEIP bylaws, which I think is still in process, and you'll probably hear more about it in the coming years. We did discuss the EAC work plan for 2022-25, but I was kind of hesitant to lay out priorities for 2022 because I think that is something that should be done by the incoming committee for 2022. I think a committee that is finishing its term should not lay out the priorities for the committee that is coming, and it kind of ties them down. Very much, most of 90% of the priorities are already identified, but I just think that it is something that should be accepted by them as they move forward. So take the next slide, please. So we do provide advice and input. Environmental Initiative Grant Program is actually where we have much more information when we make our decisions. But in general, when we are looking at some of the bylaws and some of the other things, we actually try to do our best and try to make as much sense as possible from what we get as background information from administration. I think it is very important keep in mind that we don't have the details and the experience that the administration might have in these areas. So we take their advice and we take their help as something very important in making our recommendations to the council. Next slide, please. So just a couple of examples, some bylaws. One of the interesting things that we noticed, and I think Shelley, you'll probably remember, we had this discussion in the last meeting that our bylaws and any kind of bylaws, they are very cut and dry. They are you will do this and you will not do this. And so we did talk about having some more friendly wording as an introduction to the bylaw, which says what exactly it is setting out to do. So much more in a positive, setting it up in a positive tone, so that people who are reading the bylaws can actually understand what is the goal behind it, why you are not allowed to do certain things and why you are allowed to do certain things. It also kind of aligns with, if you were looking at United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and you have goals on well-being, goals on infrastructure, then those kind of goals can be mentioned that through this policy, we are trying to achieve these kind of goals, which are internationally accepted standards. So just a kind of thought on how we write our bylaws, and if there is an introduction, that would be really helpful as we move forward. Of course, it's a shift, but it might be worth considering. Next slide, please, Megan. So we got a number of updates during our year, and these are, some of them are regular updates. We get them once a year. Sometimes we get updates because there's some new bylaw or some item that is coming forward where EAC has to make a recommendation or has to make some comments. So they serve two purposes. One is that they actually are more of an educational piece for newer members, because newer members need to understand what the city is doing and how it approaches certain things. So that is one part of it. The second part is supposed to provide an update. So for members who have already been on the committee, what is of interest to them is, so what happened? Last year we saw this, last year we heard about this, but what happened next? So I think one of the recommendations that we had suggested is that some of these plans, like the Sturgeon River Watershed Management Plan, it comes forward every year. So there should be some indication as to what happened to the money that was received by this group from the city. And then what is planned to do with the money that they will receive this year? What are they going to do for the next year? So some kind of a presentation that talks about the key performance indicators and what they are planning to do for the next year. So I think that would be helpful because, of course, the educational piece is invaluable. We learn a lot while being on this committee, but I think seeing the progress and seeing how, if the city is supporting an initiative or supporting a group, how it is performing, I think that piece is also extremely important to see. Make the next one, please. So the EAC priorities, these are really ongoing projects. They have been on our list of priorities for a while, and they continue to be so. And I think it'll be a while before these get off to the list, but I think this is our regular work that we do during the year. Next, please. So here is basically a summary of what I have talked about. So the couple of things that we mentioned, we really thank the administration for providing us lots of information and education as we sit on this committee. It really helps to understand where the city is going and how it is balancing different priorities. Of course, we all understand that environment is not the only thing that you have to manage. You have to manage some other goals that the city has to pursue. So those are, so it's we find that it's a very well-balanced approach, and we don't overdo it, but definitely these are hard decisions to take. We have a very good system in our city to pursue some environmental goals, and we do them in a very consistent and a kind of a, I would say, with some amount of dedication. the group that supports us is so excited about everything that we do that it is very easy to get carried away with that. And the only recommendations we had is that because it is a citizen committee, there should be some open area where, good ideas can come forward and then turn into ideas that could go to the council for consideration. There wouldn't be many because you're already doing a lot of things, but there still should be that opportunity. The recording of minutes is more, I think, governed by how minutes are recorded in the city. But I think we have a discussion area called the roundtable, and it would be really good to actually make note of what kind of new ideas were discussed in the roundtable so that when we look back, we can figure out if those ideas, where are they worth considering? Are they worth picking up? So that was one of the recommendations. And the other one, as I mentioned, having some key performance indicators, the presentations that are done annually or come to the council frequently, come to the EAC frequently, should have some indicators as to what has been the progress. So the educational piece is great, but then what next? Or what did you do with the grant with it? So those were some of the closing thoughts, and it was really a pleasure to be on this committee. Some great people I worked with, and really thankful for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate that very much. Any questions for Anshuman or other staff? I don't see anything. That was a very good presentation. One question relating to, I guess, the last recommendation or possible enhancement. So, I mean, one of the slides earlier had kind of updates that the city has involved. So are you suggesting that there should be further updates as it relates to other groups, like maybe the North Saskatchewan River Water Alliance or other outside agencies come back as to what their initiatives are?
Yeah, because, they get a certain amount of money from the city based on the population. So the idea would be, okay, so this is our budget. This is what the city paid us for. And this is how we utilized it. And this is what we want to do in the next year. So it kind of, the presentation is a good thing, but to have that continuity to understand, whether if we really had any, I mean, it's all good work and a good project, but if we really had a question, it would be about why was money put in certain places or why it wasn't put in a certain place. Those so there has to be some, when we give out money to any group, there should be some agreed on key performance indicators. This is where we want you to perform so that we can continue to help you. And I think having that piece would really be helpful. And I think it helps us track not only just the committee members, because the committee is much more dynamic, people move away, but even for the administration point of view, it is just better to have that.
Okay, Mike, thanks, Anshuman. I appreciate your response, but isn't there, to Megan or Diane, isn't there a natural feedback mechanism back to administration whenever we give out grants and funding? Don't we have that natural feedback in the process?
It depends. Like for the grant program, yes, definitely. We request part of the funding agreement is to request a report back from the organizations. But for North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance or the Alberta Capital Airshed, we don't have a formal reporting back, but for the work that they do on an annual basis.
That surprises me, actually, in some form. I know some of that's almost like a requisition almost, but it surprises me that we don't have some sort of reporting back. Anyways, any other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, I don't see anything else. Thank you very much, Anshuman. We have a couple of recommended motions. Councillor Hughes, do you want to read those in?
Okay, hold on. Ooh, give me a second here. Okay, there we go. The Environmental Advisory Committee Annual Report for 2021 provided as an attachment to the January 17th, 2022 agenda report titled Environmental Advisory Committee 2021 Annual Report be received as information. And that the Community Living Study Committee recommend to Council that the Environmental Advisory Committee's proposed 2022 priorities as set out in the committee's 2021 annual report be approved.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any comments?
I just want to thank Mr. Kerr for coming and presenting this and giving such a thorough annual report. And every time we come, the priority sessions from the EAC are always very well done. And the report is always very enlightening as well. So I really do appreciate that. I appreciate also him coming again today and closing off his time with us. And I think everything that we have is pretty clear in there. And I appreciate the transparency that we have on this committee and the feedback that we've received to date.
Thank you very much. Mayor Herron.
I just want to say thanks to Anshuman. I mean, he has volunteered on so many committees with the city. He's an infinite amount of knowledge and resource. For those of you who don't know, he sat on the Smart City Task Force with myself years ago, and I think that product was really good. And now the Environmental Advisory Committee. So it's endless, and he continues to put his hand up to volunteer for the city. So, you know, I'm fine with the motions that it is. I just wanted to say thank you to Anshuman for all his work. And I promise you, Anshuman, I'm going to get a dinner with Travis and Bruno, and we'll get together and do a reunion of the Smart City Committee very soon as we're allowed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Herron. Councillor Bermaski.
I would like to say thank you to Anshuman as well, and as well to the other committees, other members that are leaving the committee. A very thorough job was done. The small amount of time I was there, I saw all your efforts, and I hope that some of the ideas that you've put forward, we can, continue for you. So again, if you could convey the message that I appreciate everyone that is on the board currently and those besides yourself that are leaving the board. So thank you again.
Great comments. And I know that had Councillor Hanson been here, she would also add her or echo all of the comments. I know she really appreciated all of the work and her involvement, and Councillor Jolly as well. Anshuman, when the mayor said infinite, that just means you're old. That's all.
I would just like to add one thing. I mean, we have tremendous support from Megan. She responds quickly, gathers all the information that we need. So, she has been a tremendous resource, and I think without her, we wouldn't be able to do all the work that we do. So, thanks to her as well.
Yeah, your comments are very much appreciated. We really always appreciate all of our staff involvement, and thank you, Megan. Thank you, Diana. I'm sure that those comments will be shared. Closing, anything, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, two things. Yes, I agree. The staff, when I was on the EAC, have been extremely supportive and very positive experience for everybody, I believe. And the second thing is, I'm really sort of butchering your name probably 1,000 times just in the minutes alone. I'm really that because anyway, I'm not going to get it right. I'm not going to try again because I'm not going to get it right for a fourth time. But I just wanted to acknowledge that and just say I apologize for doing that. And I do really appreciate the work that you put into this, as well as the rest of the committee. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Call the question. All in favor? Just show your hands. I don't need anything else. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Anshuman. I'm sure we'll see each other quite a bit through one way or another. Anyway,
yeah,
all the
I
best.
look forward to that. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7.2, Pehonan reconciliation. Dana, I see you. I also see a good friend of mine from the past, Elliot Young, who is, it's going to be great to see him again. And I think I see Shani as well. There we go. There we go. Go ahead, Dana, if you have some opening comments.
I do, yes. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's meeting to discuss Pehonan recommendation number 2. On September 9th, 2019, Pehonan engagement report was received as information by council. On July 5th, 2021, council approved $50,000 to secure a consultant to develop foundational framework and recommendations for the Indigenous Relations Focus Committee of Council. Pipigwan Pitagwan, formerly Gwyn Communications, which is an Indigenous-owned public relations agency who focuses on elevating Indigenous voices, was contracted to complete this work. Before I hand things over to Shawnee and Elliot for a presentation, I want to identify that within their report, the recommended membership breakdown includes 9 spots for various nations, including the Inuit, First Nation, and Métis Nation, and up to 7 spots for urban Indigenous community members. It's administration's recommendation that these urban Indigenous community members are specifically required to be residents of St. Albert or individuals who work within St. Albert. Additionally, I want to confirm that today we're asking committee to recommend to council that a committee of council focusing on Indigenous relations be supported for establishment, and to direct administration to develop a bylaw for that committee. We did identify under financial implications that if directed to draft a bylaw, we would be recommending in the bylaw that this committee be allotted $10,000 to support their work. However, we're not asking for approval of that noted $10,000 at today's meeting, but this would be discussed and decided on if we're directed to come back with that bylaw in April. I will now turn it over to Elliot and Shawnee to present a summary of their report.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dana. And thank you, Cindy. I just want to thank Dana and Cindy off the bat for being amazing to work with. And it's great to see you again, Ken. It's been a while. Congratulations on the re-election.
Thank you.
All right, so let me just share my screen here. Get this going. Oops, that is not the way that was supposed to go. No, percent. There, sorry. There we go. So I'll introduce myself a little bit, and I'll pass it off to Shawnee to chat about Paper One. So my name is Elliot Young. I'm from Ermineskin Cree Nation. That's located about, that's about an hour and a half south of St. Albert. That's where my dad is from. That's where a lot of my family is from. I have a lot of family from Louisville tribe as well. That is located right beside Ermineskin. And then along with family from Musquechees, my mom is actually from a community located right beside Calgary. It's called Sutana. It's a Dene Nation. And so I have a lot of family from down south as well. That's me. I'm going to pass it off to Shawnee to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Tansei, my name is Shawnee Gwynn. I'm the founder and owner of Pipiguan Pitaguan. We are a Indigenous owned, operated, and majority staffed public relations agency. And part of that work, we also do engagement, which Elliot was kind enough to lead this project on our behalf. I'm a 6th generation Métis. I am a descendant of Michelle First Nation, which I think a lot of you are familiar with. First Nation that used to exist in the Calahoo area. And then I am part of the Cunningham clan and the Ferguson clan, Cunninghams who settled in St. Albert. And then I also have Irish, Welsh, and Scottish descent. So that's a little bit about me. And I guess a little bit about the agency, and really looking forward to presenting this to council today.
Thank you, Shawnee. So just to share a bit about the team, obviously Shawnee has been leading this whole project. I was working with Sarah Cook, who is an associate with Pipiguan Pitaguan, leading the engagement, the writing, the editing, working directly with Dana. And then Melina Goose, is that how you pronounce it, Goose or Goose? Yeah. She's the one that did the designing for the team as well. So jumping right in, St. Albert Indigenous Advisory Committee, I'll pass off to Shawnee to talk about the first two bullets.
Thanks, Elliot. So in the spring of 2021, the city of St. Albert did engage Pipiquan Pitagwan to support the city's reconciliation efforts, specifically on the development of the Indigenous Committee of Council. So the need was to make a significant move to work more closely with Indigenous peoples living in St. Albert and the surrounding areas. And there was also a need to take action towards reconciliation and, of course, decolonization.
Yeah, and the purpose behind the project, and really from September to December last year, we engaged with Indigenous communities from St. Albert and the surrounding area to develop the Indigenous Community Committee of Council's terms of reference, the recruitment strategy, candidate selection guide, and the immediate priorities. The outcomes of this were the development of those documents, but some of the intangible pieces that came out of this was that there was momentum to keep reconciliation, decolonization moving within St. Albert, and really the focus around action. And you could tell that the group was really excited about the next steps of the work. And I'll jump right into it to talk about our methodology of thinking about how we did it and what we did and why we did it. So we focused on focus groups, and we hosted 4 focus groups from September to December and participated in that in a circle process. And the reason why we did a circle process, and it looked different for each focus group because there was varying attendance at each one. But for the first one, we separated them into 2 groups and then did a circle process. And the reason why we did a circle process is that every person has an opportunity to speak and an equal opportunity to speak, and also an equal opportunity to pass it along if they felt like they didn't have anything to say at the time. And then we'll go around again around that circle to make sure that if there was an opportunity for them to add on to something, then they can add on to it. But it was really a space to engage that is really based within Indigenous knowledge. And then for those that weren't able to participate in the focus group or had other commitments or had a very limited time to participate in the project, we offered interviews, which we actually had 3 people that participated in interviews, and then 11 participants that participate in the focus groups. So the next piece is the summary findings. I'm going to go through 4 pieces that are in the summary findings in the final report. I'm not going to go through every single values and principle. You can find that in the report. But what I do want to emphasize in this piece is that each and every one of these values and principles is connected to Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous reciprocity and accountability and responsibility. And so talking about ceremony and protocol, really being that connection to Indigenous knowledge culture, I shouldn't say Indigenous culture, but First Nations culture, that's starting off with ceremony and protocol. And those other pieces around community engagement, that was a big emphasis throughout the engagement. And really the values and principles are something that each and every participant that comes into the Indigenous Committee of Council will need to adhere by. That it's basing the conversations, the way that this committee moves forward within Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous principles, and that's the foundation of this. So each of those tie back to the conversations and to Indigenous knowledge. So for the actual composition of this committee, we are talking about 16 people in total. And for the First Nations, we've identified each First Nation and then 1 corresponding member for that First Nation. And then we've identified 4 other ones that are specific to an organization or to a demographic. So City of St. Albert Métis Local has 1, Confederacy of Treaty 6, another, MNA Region 4, another one, and then an Inuit one is the last kind of designated spot. And then the urban Indigenous community, we have 7. And so the the interesting piece about this one is that I think in the thing that pulls it apart from the other committee of councils is that some of these members will not be or residents of St. Albert, just depending on where they're coming from, especially with the First Nations and the Métis locals and the Treaty 6 and potentially in Inuit. Each of those will be determined through a partnership kind of conversation between those organizations. And then the urban Indigenous community, that is where the stipulation of being a resident of St. Albert can be applied. And this is also where we see certain demographics of elders are used kind of filling those urban Indigenous community spots. The next one is thinking about, and this ties to kind of the recruitment strategy and the candidate selection guide. One piece, oops, I messed up on that piece. So the candidate competencies, there's only 4 of them. So that collaborative process, sorry, it's duplicated. It should have only been under the candidate selection. The 4 candidate competencies are community engaged, lived experience, credentials, and community wellness. It's not expected that each candidate that is going to be selected has an equal kind of understanding of each of these, but really the intention is that each of these competencies are spread out through the selected candidates, and that there's a balance between all of them. So that way each of those perspectives are identified and represented within those conversations and that composition. And the candidate selection is really a collaborative process. And so for the selection of the new members or the first members of the Indigenous committee is collaborative and working with identified members of the Indigenous Advisory Committee that has worked on this project that are not going to be applying for these positions. And so being able to work collaboratively with them is really important, ensuring that these competencies, these values, these principles, the underlying kind of movement towards Indigenous knowledge is represented through those conversations, through this selection and through this whole process. And then after this, when the term has ended for these first ones, then it is again working collaboratively with Indigenous community members, those either not identifying or not wanting to be reappointed or identified Indigenous community members from the community to work along that. So this candidate selection is very much a collaborative process. Oh, geez. Oh no, I'm going through 2 screens and I'm making sure that I can follow, and it's proving to be a little tricky. Okay. So summary findings for the first year priorities that are identified from the Indigenous Advisory Committee. And again, this is all within the report, but to go over quickly, define what reconciliation and indigenization looks like. So that definition is very important. Develop a mechanism to engage Indigenous communities. So being able to engage the Indigenous community was emphasized quite frequently through the conversations. And so it's just really determining what that looks like. And it's not one thing, it could be multiple, and it is really up to the community to kind of have that conversation. And again, focus on engaging community, but not only engagement, but also community development is looking at hosting an annual gathering, bringing Indigenous communities, the community together and bringing them around food. And obviously COVID is going to play a role within that, but we can, the group really emphasizes the need to host an annual gathering. Explore needs and options for an indoor space. So actually being able to dedicate a space for this work and for the Indigenous community. There was an emphasis on holding space for this. And update sections of the terms of reference. And this is where I'm thinking about the conflict resolution, termination, and a bit of the decision-making piece. And the last piece that I wanted to go through was kind of looking forward, and this is recommendations that were identified by the big one that we were either kind of pulled out threads from the discussions And we're able to identify kind of some other pieces. And that is conduct an initial planning session. So really thinking about there are immediate needs for the first year, but what does it look like long term? Like what is planning? What does a strategic plan or a work plan look for this group? Approve the Indigenous Committee of Council. So obviously this is kind of one step in that. The recruitment, and this is really emphasizing the collaborative process of candidate selection, of really ensuring that the Indigenous community is involved within the recruitment process. Approves the use of honorarium in the Indigenous Community of Council. And the last one, which is also kind of in its work already, is secure administrative support to ensure the Indigenous Council has resources to focus on developing the strategy and actions. So through the conversations, there was really a focus on action and really moving towards action. There's been a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of engagement. Now the next step is action. And really it's a way of being accountable to the Indigenous community. And this work, especially with the work towards decolonization, indigenization, and reconciliation, there's not an endpoint, but really rather it's an ongoing process that is complex and cyclical. So there's always going to be times for self-reflection, and which is really important for the commitment from the city and also the council of really being able to think about this process as moving towards transformation and change, and that it will be uncomfortable. There's going to be things that are going to be talked about that are unknown. There's going to be things that are going to push kind of the conversations in ways that require council to really think reflectively on their role within colonization and reconciliation. And the way that I'm thinking about it is in the sense of uncomfortable, and it will be uncomfortable, but it will be worth it in the sense of being able to go through a process that is going to transform the city, but also transform you individually in the sense of being exposed to conversations, being exposed to protocol, being exposed to why the connection to these conversations is so important to addressing systemic issues, but also community issues within St. Albert. That's essentially all that I have for a presentation. Shani, Dana, anything that you wanted to add?
I have nothing to add. Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks, Dina, and thanks, Elliot. Just wanted to thank the City of St. Albert for this opportunity and acknowledge the really great work done by Elliot, Sarah, and Dana. It was a pleasure to be part of this, and we're really looking forward to see how it moves forward.
Thank you, Shani. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Dana. I'm going to open it up for questions. I've got a couple, though, just to start off with in relation to, I have a great report. Thank you very much. I read it and I see the tie-in relation to the work that's come before in relation to Behonan and particularly recommendation number 2 that recommended that we establish. And I think at that time, they were talking about calling it a reconciliation committee, but I realized as time goes on, names tend to change as well, and so recommendations. So I understand that, and I understand the thought behind it. So in the structure, and this is where it's going to get probably complicated, and I'd be more interested in relation to what you mean by the collaborative process as to how do we identify. So for example, when we talk about the surrounding First Nation communities in relation to their involvement in a committee, is that like a position for the actual First Nation, or is it actually identifying as an individual, or could it be both? Because Elliot, you know our past in relation to working together when we're trying to engage with different First Nations, it's just almost impossible to always get the same individual, which makes continuity challenging, right? So any thoughts on that, or is that just something that the committee or we have to work through as from administration?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts about it, and the first that jumps to mind is that it's really holding space for First Nations and those organizations to be involved in this work. And when I mean it being a collaborative approach in the sense of partnership, or in the sense of the beginning steps of a relationship, is that you're holding space for this community, not only within those conversations, but within the decision making or the influence within the city of St. Albert. And that's and what that looks like in the sense of who is actually sitting at that table, I think is in those conversations with those First Nations. To give you an idea, just in the way that it's worked in the Indigenous Advisory Committee, with Alexander First Nation, they have a counselor that is dedicated specifically for reconciliation efforts within the surrounding area or within Alberta. So they have that person. Unfortunately, wasn't able to participate in our process. Paul First Nation, they appointed one of their senior administrators or an administrator to sit on it. So it really depends on who are on the First Nation and how they want to have somebody there. And also compared to City of Treaty 6 appointed one of their elders to sit on there as well. So it really depends on who the organization is or who the First Nation is.
So in doing the background research, have you approached Alexander First Nation, Paul Band, and Enoch in relation to already kind of inform them that we are looking at standing up a committee like this, or is it something that we have to do?
Paul First Nation would know. They were involved through the focus groups. Alexander First Nation knows the intent of the Indigenous Advisory Committee, with its intention of building this committee, so that it is on their radar, but would need to be kind of brought up to date on what's happening. Enoch Cree Nation, I've reached out several times, just wasn't able to get them involved. And that's the same with Alexis Nakota Sioux. Shell First Nation were involved, and they would be, I think they would be heavily involved moving forward as well. So they're at different starting points or different points of knowing kind of where you're at, but the reach out or we have sent correspondence to them to let them know what we're doing and what the intent of the Indigenous Advisory Committee was. And so the short answer is they're each at different points of that relationship. And to be how would I say this? To be quite honest, you'll need to meet the First Nations where they're at, and being able to work with them in the way that they're able to work. I would, how would I say it? And this is where it might be uncomfortable at points where working with communities, giving that authority or giving that conversation over to them to determine who is the best person to work within this committee, might at times leave it vulnerable to the different priorities that are happening within that community. Just to use Alexander as a First Nation, Alexander as an example, since they have a counselor that is appointed as their reconciliation kind of delegate, that would mean that position on the Indigenous Committee of Council would depend on that counselor's term, their term, and that is elected. So there's things to be considered with it that may make it a little uncomfortable, but all of this is to the point of saying that like working with the First Nations and working with where they're at is really important.
I understand that, and I appreciate the challenges you had in having to deal with some of the surrounding kind of conversations that we need. But I mean, if in the Pehonan report, one of the recommendations is to kind of strengthen your discussion around meeting First Nations where they're at. But there was also a desire arising out of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee recommendations is that we, as a municipality, meet nations face to face and have those conversations as a nation I'm obviously St. Albert's a municipality and we stand up at the whim of the MGA, but we still have those conversations. So what's the conflict between that recommendation and then working with us advising council. Do you see where I'm going? Do you see if there's a conflict if we're dealing with them at a higher level and then working with them on a working committee, or is it like that? Do you think is that how you would describe that? Because I still maybe, and this is as we start to roll out what the structure is and the involvement, like how do we work together? Because I don't see them together, because for example, if we're working with Alexander on potentially economic development opportunities, we're dealing with them up here at a chief and council level. Whereas if we're dealing with Alexander First Nation as part of the advisory committee, what are their jobs, and could you not see that maybe there's confusion?
Yeah, definitely. I see where you're going with that. So there's still an importance of having that kind of how to say it, like a nation to nation relationship in the sense of elected leadership, engaging with elected leadership. And I think the way that you framed it in the sense of it being a working group is probably the most accurate way of looking at this, and that it's really focused on action and they're going to be working through that action. So what I see this kind of going is that it's not necessarily either or, it's just more of like a two-pronged approach of being able to engage with First Nations and identifying that this is one of those opportunities to not only be involved in the high level pieces, but be involved in the kind of the implementation of the operational or the way to impact community within St. Albert. So it's continuing those conversations at a high level strategic kind of a nation to nation, but this is one of those pieces that is the working kind of action group. And those conversations can happen simultaneously, I think. And when thinking about Alexander as an example, it's having that conversation with chief and council of laying it out and being very transparent that this is where we're at, this is what we're working towards. Do you feel it's appropriate to have that counselor or somebody within your organization that is, or kind of leaving that up to them to decide who would be the best and to represent. And so I think there's still that importance of having that nation to nation, but also kind of being very transparent about the work of this group and that both of those are going to have to happen. And I hope that I'm making sense with that. And maybe Shawnee, do you have some kind of insight or something else to add to that?
No, I'm just nodding in agreement.
She's not helping you, but I understand, and part of it is a challenge, and I realize, and I guess it's just going to depend a little bit about what administration believes is the purpose behind it. Like, I mean, is this going to be similar to a regular advisory committee or a different type of committee that doesn't really is higher level? And do we meet regularly, or like by regular, do we meet monthly? Do we meet quarterly? Do we meet as required? And so, I mean, and how do issues get in front of the advisory committee? So I mean, a lot of that is yet to work out. And so I realize some of the questions I'm asked maybe don't have responses right now, but I just, as I was going through it and reading your report and then going back to both the TRC and then the Pehonan report, I mean, there's so many different recommendations and different levels that I just don't want to have duplication or step on other toes or other level of work that's occurring. So I recognize the need for this and I understand it, but I think, sorry for the bailout, but the devil's in the details, I guess is the question. Anyways, Mayor Herron has her hand up, I see.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. A couple of questions. The slide we're on right now that talked about membership. Ellie, you mentioned that you talked to quite a few. How about, I don't remember you saying anything. Is Michelle Band aware and willing to serve on a committee?
Yeah, so we had originally we had Dale Calahoo, if that I'm remembering her name properly. We had her, but it then transferred over to Wendy Gertz, who is a resident of St. Albert and is a member of Michelle First Nation, our Michelle Band, and they were really excited about the work and really excited to keep it going. So I think Michelle would be on board.
Yeah, I find them very important just because of the proximity to where they would and maybe should be. So I'd like to maintain that. And then I noticed in the report, you says you consulted with Poundmaker, but we're not recommending that they sit as a member on the committee. Is there a reason? Are they not interested? I just feel like we need to keep them informed and in the conversation as well.
Oh, let me just see here. Sorry if I'm not.
That's okay.
The exact wordage of it.
Did I miss something in the report?
No, I'm just looking to see if I made that specifically. So Poundmaker's Lodge, we've reached out and unfortunately didn't get a lot of uptake on them being participating, and towards the end I did reach out to one of them and they seemed interested, but the timing just didn't work out. With the identification of the First Nations and then the Métis Local and then Confederacy Treaty 6 and then Inuit, all of those are tied to they're tied specifically to I would say Métis or First Nations leadership or advocacy kind of bodies. Poundmakers, I think, would fall within that urban Indigenous community members piece. And Dana, if you want to have anything else to add to this piece, but for me, the identification of the First Nations, the Métis Local, Treaty 6, and the Métis Region 4, and then Inuit, just specifically Inuit, because we wanted to make sure that demographic was represented within this committee. Those are all tied to the specific relationship with those First Nations or those advocacy bodies.
Okay, as long as Poundmaker could be considered under Indigenous, urban Indigenous, that would be great. I know Dana, hopefully, I can't remember the name of the girl, I gave you the card. You guys have had meetings since. She's new and she seems eager to get involved. They want to have their own committee with the city. I don't know, Dana, how are those conversations going?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herron. So I have had additional conversations with Siobhan, and we have some different meetings aligned for engagement on specific projects and particular topics. So those are coming together quite well. When we began the advisory work for this piece, I didn't have Siobhan as a contact. She was not part of their team quite yet. So it was sort of right at the very end of this work. And I think under that urban Indigenous category, the folks from Poundmaker would very easily fit within that spot and have the opportunity to be a member of this committee of council from that perspective.
I'd like to see that pursued. And then beyond membership, I was looking on page 6 of the report, page 41 of our whole package. It talked about some of the immediate recommendations identified. I'm just curious to explore a little bit more about the needs and options for an indoor space. So kind of what we're thinking, is this a permanent space? Is it just giving the meeting room once in a while? Like, what are we talking about?
So the conversation was about a permanent space. So a space that not only there could be events, ceremony held there, but it would be a space for Indigenous people to feel welcome and to gather. And so I would say it'd be leaning towards that side of a permanent, an actual permanent space.
Yeah, and if I may, I'll just add to that as well, is It aligns with that Pehonan, the 14th recommendation in the Pehonan report, which was a consideration for a permanent space. So a lot of the folks that we were speaking with and that Elliot was working with are familiar with the Pehonan report, and they were making that connection and bringing that up and just re-emphasizing that that recommendation is still important to make these community relationships.
Awesome. And the annual gathering, I feel like the city has, well, you know, prior to COVID, we would have an annual in June. I think it would be held. I think Gwen Krause was always big part of the organizing committee, National Indigenous Days. Is there something, is it the annual gathering something other than what we're already doing?
From the conversations we had, I think it would be, yes, it would be something different. That would be different from like National Indigenous Peoples Day or Truth and Reconciliation Day. It would be a specific day to bring community together, and it wouldn't be aligned with National Indigenous People or Truth and Reconciliation Day. I'm trying to think of examples that they have within the community. An example that I can think of is End Poverty Edmonton Indigenous Circle. Like they've been attempting to host a round dance quite over the past 2 years, but of course with COVID, there's nothing that they could do. But the intention there, and they're hosting it in the fall, not aligned with any of those, just to bring community together and for really the community to know a bit more about the Indigenous Circle from End Poverty Edmonton. So that way they kind of know what's going on, they know who's a part of it. And it's also an open invitation for people to come and join in the meetings. And that would be similar to this, where all these community meetings, if I understand, are open to the public. So then it would be an open invitation for Indigenous community members of St. Albert to participate. And it's really a way to build that connection between this committee and the Indigenous community.
Awesome. Thanks for that. That's all the questions I had, Councillor Mackay.
Thanks, Mayor Herron. Councillor Bermansky, you have your hand up for a while. Thank you.
Hi, I do want to echo, Councillor Mackay's questions about, the devil in the details. It seems like there's a lot of details missing here. And I did want to ask the same questions that Mayor Herron just asked about the space. So when you talk about the events, you said it would, the events you would host, it would be open to Indigenous people. Do you mean Indigenous peoples from the surrounding area and just Indigenous people in the city of St. Albert, or the general public in city of St. Albert? And where would the funding for these events be coming from? So that's the first question I have.
So I'll tackle the first part of that question, then I'm going to pass the financial piece over to Dana. So the first part is any event that is held, like a round dance or anything like that, or even a feast, is open to the public. So whatever the Indigenous committee decides will be open to the Indigenous community of St. Albert, but also the general public and the surrounding area. Just to give you an idea of it, if they decided to do a round dance is open to everyone, and even from the surrounding communities. The singers will actually come from all over the place. Usually with round dances, you'll have singers and drummers that will actually go from round dance to round dance because you'll get paid to sing. So it would be open. It would be open to anybody. If it's a feast, if it's something that's a little bit more intimate, there might be some conversations around who is invited and from where. But if it's a community event, it will most likely take the shape of like a round dance or something. But with all of that, I think the Indigenous committee would have a conversation of how open it is and who is attending, and if it is like round dance, would be open to everybody. Dana, if you want to talk about that.
I can actually jump in on the finance one, Elliot. So when we had put forward the operating business case to council to formalize the Indigenous Relations Program, which council approved in December, we did include enough budget to ensure any type of ceremony or event could be done within those existing dollars. So there would be no additional ask for money to do anything sort of an ongoing or typical nature of what we'd ask this committee to help organize and support. And one of the things we've also built is we would want the administrative support of this committee to be provided by the Indigenous Relations Advisor. And that's to ensure, as Councillor Mackay indicated earlier, we want to make sure there's no duplication. Of course, we want to have a multi-pronged approach. We want to be working at that higher governance level, as well as improving and enhancing our operational pieces. But by having that same coordinated person supporting both, this way we can ensure there's no duplication and we're being as efficient as we possibly can.
Okay, and the other question is I'm finding it, I know the intent is there and the purpose is valid, but I'm trying to understand, like, when we're getting into surrounding areas. I mean, St. Albert isn't a large population to be funding, all surrounding areas. It gets sort of more into a provincial and federal type funding. And so when we're looking at actual numbers, we're looking at the dollar amount for a committee, first of all, which most committees, don't have funding to be a committee. So we have to justify that amount, and then the amount for the space, and then the amount for the honorariums. And there's just so much unanswered here, like so many items that come up that aren't necessarily, St. Albert expenses, I guess, to speak. So, I mean, how far do we go in the surrounding area, and what, a St. Albert citizen would be willing to support? So I would definitely like to see a lot more information on all the, the intent of actual costs of this committee, aside from the initial request.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy, if you were going to respond.
I was just going to ask Elliot or Shawnee if they had any maybe specific examples. But again, as part of the reconciliation journey, I think what we're trying to really achieve, Councillor Biermanski, is helping this become every resident of St. Albert's collective journey. And we, there's a lot of people in light of Kamloops and beyond, and frankly, even before then, there's just a lot of people that don't understand the history. And so we look at this as an opportunity to be leaders in the community, to be able to help bring people together and have some of those difficult but really important conversations so that we can heal together and move forward. And that's why it would be so important. And I think there's so many people that maybe relocated to the outskirts of our community, but have a lot of really strong roots. And so our goal would be to, this would be for everybody. We'd be working really closely with schools. We would be looking to bring together sort of history, and then that, collective opportunity to move forward together. So definitely appreciate your comments that we need to be efficient, and we need to be very aware of the funding element, but we're also really looking forward to the relationship building, and then again, of course, that healing towards reconciliation. But I don't know, Elliot or Shawnee, if you happen to have a similar example in the region that you can maybe point to.
Not necessarily. I think the way that this was framed, in the sense of connecting it to First Nations and those specific members of the and hopefully I'm answering this correctly or providing insight in this way, is because the relationship with St. Albert, and specifically with the surrounding areas, it's all connected to traditional territory, and that before St. Albert was here, these First Nations were here. So there's a bit of a historical type of relationship that is connected to those First Nations. And then along with that, with the Métis Nation, Region 4 and the local, there's an existing relationship with City St. Albert, and it's important to continue that relationship. And then Confederacy Treaty 6, that is just a great voice to have, that is representing not only the 5 that were represented in those First Nations, but it's one that represents all of this area and the traditional territory of this area. The importance of that is really being able to show that relationship with those First Métis extends beyond just that nation one, that there's there's a recognition that the work that needs to be done within the city of St. Albert isn't wholly by St. Albert within the sense of reconciliation and decolonization, that it is dependent on those conversations and the input of those First Nations, of the Métis, of the Inuit, of ensuring that they're being that the city of St. Albert is being accountable to the Indigenous community, but the specific Indigenous community members. That was really important through the conversations that were happening in this group, and that the way to move towards reconciliation, decolonization, is not doing what you're currently doing, but doing something, moving towards transformation and moving towards change, and being able to extend the to the surrounding community is so important on making that change. That's what's jumping out at me in the sense of thinking about surrounding community and why there was such an emphasis on having the surrounding community involved in that way. Yeah, that's what's jumping out at me in that piece. Shawnee, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I get, excuse me, I woke up a little bit sick this morning, so I have to forgive my gremlin voice. But I guess one thing that I would want to share is just how unique of an opportunity it is to have community reporting directly to council. That is pretty well unheard of at this point in Alberta that I'm aware of. In municipalities or government, I'm sure you all know there's so many levels of bureaucracy, and it would be difficult for that perspective to go untouched to you through administrative, like a more formal administrative process. And so I know just from working in the Indigenous Relations Office in the past, how incredible that opportunity was to actually sit and talk to community members directly, the initiatives that they wanted to see, because you're just not going to get that passion directly from a bureaucrat. And even though maybe you will have someone who is very passionate about it, but you're just, I think the quality of information, the types of initiatives that are going to come through, and hearing it directly from the committee is just going to be so impactful. And you're going to hear things that change your perspective. And just going back to our presentation we did not that long ago, just hearing from a lot of council on things that they weren't aware of, or how community might view certain things. This is a really amazing opportunity to prioritize reconciliation and decolonizing structure and systems, and sort of putting those traditional colonial structures maybe to the side and trying something different. I don't have a lot to say about costs because I don't know. I know that would come for administration, but I just wanted to reiterate that this is just a really amazing and incredibly unique opportunity to work directly with community. It won't obviously erase any other community member that will be wanting to come forward and may have a different perspective, but I think it's just, I don't know, I'm just excited to see this maybe come to fruition, and really grateful that we were asked to even look at it and that council was considering it.
Thanks, Shawnee. I appreciate it, and hopefully you feel better soon or continue on the road. Councillor Hughes, I saw your hand up. I'll just one question before you, if you don't mind me interrupting. Shawnee, I know you were with the City of Edmonton, and Elliot, you're in Northwest, and you were with UOCYA. Are there, and you touched on a little bit in your response, but are there other examples of this that you're aware of at municipalities where we have a similar structure? I know that, there's advisory groups, but at the same time, what about anything similar to what's being proposed here? Is there anything else going on in Alberta, or anything that you're aware of?
I will pass it to Elliot here quickly. I am aware that Mayor Sohi was trying to make something like this happen in his platform. I don't know where they are in the process, but he had identified sort of having the anti-racism committee and the Indigenous community put a committee together that would report directly to council. So I guess if you might beat him to the punch, but I'm not aware of any others in Alberta. Elliot, are you?
No, not through a municipality. No, I haven't seen similar things through a municipality. No, I haven't.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, sorry, I stepped on your question there. I apologize.
No, not at all. It's all good. So one quick question that just keeps coming back to my brain is, all the council committees that we have to date are all a volunteer and non-paid position. Is it the intention to have that as well for this committee, or are we planning to do honorariums just to attend on the committee?
Oh yeah, Cindy, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to pass it over to you, either you or.
Oh. It's my understanding that the recommendation from the working group is that we ensure to respect and provide honoraria, and we did ensure that the program would have adequate budget for that. So yes, Councillor Hughes, we'd be looking to provide honorarium, and yes, that's already built into existing budget, so there would not be an additional ask for that.
So the $10,000 is for what then? Because that's not going to cover enough for honorariums when we have 14 people attending meetings. So the 10,000 is for staffing support and office supplies, I'm guessing?
The 10,000 would probably be used maybe similar to what the police committee has done, in that, for example, during Pride, we know they purchased a booth so that they could engage with committee here directly, make sure that they're meeting the needs of residents. So there's not necessarily a specific intent, but any program dollars for the Indigenous portfolio are currently tied to administration. And it was recommended that perhaps we look at supporting the committee to have a little bit of authority or individuality. So it would have some parameters. It wouldn't be covering things like honoraria unless it was for a very specific event and part of a grander budget. But it'd be more about providing opportunities to connect, because again, as it's identified in the report, they're meant to represent and speak on behalf of and try to support. And so this would be a way to give them just a little bit of wiggle room to go out and engage.
So what is the real gonna, because then the costs aren't 10,000. I understand that we've already approved the budget for it, but what is the real costs then before we do events? What is our expected real costs for this committee? Because 10,000 doesn't cover the real costs if we're paying honorariums.
So the honoraria budget that was approved as part of the operating business case in budget. So we do have that in the program funding that already exists for the Indigenous. So to continue with the ceremony and protocol and different events and acknowledgements that we already do. So the $10,000, and again, that's something that we wanted to recommend to council as part of consideration in the bylaw, but it's one element. So it can be. It is something that council can choose not to support, to give them individual money, the way some committees of council don't already have funds. But it was identified that, as I mentioned, the police committee has that. And it just provides them a little bit of wiggle room separate from administration to go out and connect. And that would be the intention of this.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the 10,000. I'm talking about the money that we're not mentioning in the backgrounder. Because if we're doing honorariums just to attend meetings, for feedback, then 10,000 is not the actual budget. It may not be an additional financial implication, but there is a financial implication that's not mentioned in the backgrounder.
So because the operating business case contained multiple elements, some of it, again, for example, the operating business case supports the position for an Indigenous relations advisor or coordinator, and they would be the one providing support to this committee. So we'd probably have to take that as an information request to give you a really specific breakdown of how those program dollars, what goes to events versus, what is administration sort of time and support if this committee were to be approved, what would go to honoraria. We could probably flesh that out, but it's probably not something I should just speak to off the top of my head if I want to make sure I get you the right numbers.
Yeah, I think that when we have a backgrounder, it should reveal that information. There should be a full transparency about what we're actually agreeing to, and that this backgrounder fails to mention that adequately. because it looks like it's just $10,000, nothing more. And the fact that this was pre-approved a month ago doesn't negate the costs that this program is going to have to run. So I think that needs to be properly disclosed. The other thing I'm just not sure of is, I guess it's just gonna be feedback, Dana, because it just is going to be very difficult to say no to a lot of initiatives that the committee brings forward. And so I guess I'm looking for reassurance that there will be a fiscal consideration brought forward when there are recommendations brought forward to council for whatever the initiative might be, that there is a recognition that there is a limited funding on an annual basis to come forward, because it will be very challenging to say no and then still maintain the integrity of trying to do reconciliation. So what is being considered to ensure that, like, is there going to be proper disclosure about, like, this is our total budget that we have for the year to spend on things, or that sort of concern? Because I think of, like, the seniors, for example, and they came forward and they had many ideas, and some were very expensive ideas. And council ultimately said no to some of them, and not to disrespect seniors, but just because of other implications and considerations that council had to consider. So what is being done before it comes to council, whatever's being brought forward is something that we can afford to do financially? I mean, like, within the current budgeting, is there plans to bring that into consideration?
So I think our goal is to have that same person coordinate both. So again, sometimes committees are supported by a member, for example, of the legislative services team. In this situation, it would be the Indigenous Relations Advisor who would support it, to ensure that there was a real alignment and a lot of clarity, and a recognition that there was limited budget to maybe tackle any ideas or new initiatives that come forward. The other piece is we've been really, when we've been trying to recognize annual days and bringing together for ceremony, a lot of times we're doing it on a very ad lib or ad hoc basis. So we're calling out to people in community that we know we're somewhat inconsistent, and we're doing the best with what we have, but we don't have that constant voice or that continual voice of equal representatives guiding us in this work. So in terms of doing a whole lot more, I'm not sure there'll be a whole lot more. What we're hoping to do is do it a whole lot better, and be much more engaging, much more inclusive. And of course, we would be able to enhance what we do. But, for example, when we do Métis Week and Louis Riel Day, when we did that back in November, Dana scrambled to pull together folks to advise and what would it look like. And in that process, there's a good chance we probably didn't include someone we should have, or perhaps there were people that felt they should have been included and weren't. If we have a set committee that we know that could be that guiding voice for things, I think the city will be better poised to deliver events and ceremony and acknowledgements that we can collectively be proud of. So, with the exception of maybe something capital in terms of a space coming forward in future years, the goal really would be to do what we can do, what we're already doing, and maybe do it better, maybe add a few enhancements here and there with the collective wisdom that would be around the table. But the goal isn't to come forward with a brand new business plan that's going to incorporate, 7 large strategic priorities that are going to, be somewhat overwhelming financially. That's definitely not the goal or the intent of this group.
Okay. I just think that just definitely needs to be well communicated regularly, just to make sure that our goal is to do what we're doing better, and not necessarily, and even if we do add on another event or something, that's not a problem per se. It's just that we make sure that
I think we're lost.
There's a limited amount of funds to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve, with the intention still of achieving the goals that we're trying to achieve. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I seem to be having internet problems here.
I can hear you.
I can hear you, just can't see you, Ken. Well, I can see a picture of you, and it's close enough. I remember.
Okay, good. Yeah, no. Sorry, you guys. I'm cutting in and cutting out. Obviously, what they're doing out front of my house is impacting my feed. So if I lose you, Councillor Hughes, you might have to step in here. Any other questions? No. I think I have, I don't see anybody frozen on there, so if there's, the only other follow-up question I have to administration, and I apologize, it's you're lucky that my camera is broke, so I wish I could have had a better picture up there. I guess this is coming back. Will April 11th be enough time to bring it back I mean, because a lot of the questions, a lot of the comments around structure, around meeting frequency, around what will be included in kind of the, will obviously also impact, finances and actions going forward. So I guess, I mean, it's just going back, the 11th of April, is that going to give you enough time to bring all of that back and answer some of the questions and concerns by councillors?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mackay. So I do believe that April will be sufficient time. In much of the work that Elliot has done, I've got some additional documentation and supporting guidance documents that help flesh some of these details out in greater detail. But before we were sort of moved to the next step of drafting an entire bylaw, I didn't bombard you guys with all of that information, but I do have further documents that support this and will help that development quite smooth.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that. I think that's, I mean, you've heard some of the concerns in relation to maybe what the committee's structure looks like, what some of the priorities, what some of the activities will be like, and that then out of that comes work. And I mean, a lot of that will come back and we'll have to go through some sort of a budgeting process and approval by council, but that is even outside of existing budgets. But I think that as long as those concerns are covered in your information and the bylaw, then I think that this is something that I believe is important for our community and something that we can move forward. But as we've talked about, there's still a little bit of work to do. Any other comments? And I apologize. I'm just kind of stringing it together with a can and a string right now, you guys. So I apologize. Can I get somebody to put in the recommended motion then?
I can do it, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. Do you want them both?
Yeah, I believe so.
Sure. Okay, the report dated January 20, 2022 entitled St. Albert Indigenous Advisory Committee Report. I have to say the name. Shawnee, please forgive me. Actually, help me. Developed by, say it one more time for me.
Pipikwan.
Pitagwan. I really want to try to get these things right. So thank you.
Thank you.
Formerly known as Gwyn Communications and attached to the January 17th, 2022 Community Living Standing Committee Agenda Report entitled Pehonan Reconciliation be received for information, and that the Community Living Standing Committee recommend to council that a bylaw be passed to create a new council committee focused on Indigenous relations consistent with the recommendations in the St. Albert Indigenous Advisory Committee report, and that b council direct administration to prepare such a bylaw for consideration at the Community Living Standing Committee meeting on April 11th, 2022.
Thank you. I accept that. Any opening comments, Mayor
Hare? No, I'll echo something that was just recently said by Shawnee and how we should be excited and embracing this opportunity that's in front of the City of St. Albert Council. We just had a report from a different advisory committee or environmental advisory committee. And so we sort of have this idea of what advisory committees are in the City of St. Albert. And maybe that's a colonial idea of what an advisory committee is. I'm hoping that this one can kind of break through some of those molds and be something new and different, something that St. Albert can be proud of in the region and maybe even provincially. I think that we do have to be cautious, as both Councillor Bermansky and Councillor Hughes pointed out, about the total cost of these things, because they can run away. And Sheena, you're absolutely right. It's going to be very difficult to say no to some of the ideas. But it's going to be about a partnership and a collaborative understanding of our realities in the region and what the City of St. Albert Corporation can and cannot do. So I'm just excited about the opportunity. I think we should, instead of being worried about the financials, we should be really excited about what's in front of us. So that's my opening comments, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. Any other comments by any other committee members? I don't see anybody waving their hands. I'm hoping that I'm in real time. I'll just echo some of the comments. And one comment that you made, Mayor Herron, in relation, we have to be careful that we don't kind of box these committees or box structures into what we have traditionally seen them as. I mean, this is an opportunity around engagement. It's around an opportunity around getting a different perspective on how we have traditionally run some things from a settler's point of view, not looking outside, not engaging with our Indigenous communities. And so I'm excited like you. This is an opportunity, in boundaries. We have, but it's still an opportunity to work and learn together. And establishing this committee, I think it goes a long way to considering how our Indigenous community is involved in all of our decision-making processes. And one thing that Cindy raised is help out in ceremonies so that we actually can start to maybe work together and learn from each other, so that as we kind of walk down reconciliation, and sorry, Elliot, you used another term and I'm still catching up. And so I don't want to repeat it because I probably get it wrong. But anyways, as we kind of walk down reconciliation, I think that this will give us an opportunity to have a bigger and a broader conversation with our Indigenous partners and how best that we can build our community. So Mayor Herron, to close.
I'll just add that something that stood out when Anshuman was speaking at the Environmental Advisory Committee was even looking at the way we approach their advice. So I do feel like we have been kind of living within a box of our advisory committee. So we are having a workshop in the future on all our advisory committees and how to approach them. So we need to maybe be open to newer ideas, and this one is in particular going to be very important, to be open to new concepts and new ways of communicating. So nothing further.
Thank you. I'll call our question then. All in favor, just raise your hands. I can see them. I have myself, I'm in favor. Councillor Herron, Councillor Hughes, opposed. Councillor Bermansky is against. So that passes 3-1, and we'll move on to council. I appreciate everybody's feedback. Elliot, always great to see you again. Sorry, I hope that we can reconnect. Shawnee, I hope you get well. Treat yourself good. And thank you, administration. Dana, very much appreciated. Cindy, very much appreciated. I don't have anything else on my agenda. Am I missing something? I don't believe so. So with that, I will adjourn. Thank you very much. I apologize for the technical difficulties on my end anyways. All the best, you guys. Stay safe and don't drive.
Bye, everyone.